A 15-year-old black boy did what no grown man could. In a restaurant filled with power, wealth, and men twice his age, he would step into a storm that froze even the boldest hearts. No one saw it coming. No one imagined that the smallest voice in the room would silence the loudest threats. But when fear gripped the air and strength failed, it was this boy who stood tall. The night had begun in elegance. A billionaire of 38, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, his chestnut brown hair combed perfectly, dined beneath chandeliers dripping with gold light. His polished shoes gleamed against marble floors, his gold watch catching sparks with every flick of his wrist. Around him, guests whispered with admiration. This was power incarnate, a man who bent the world to his will. Then it happened. 4 men rose from the far end of the room. Hard men, dangerous men, each cloaked in black coats that brushed against the chairs they shoved aside. Their faces were carved with scars of violence, their eyes sharp as blades. They hadn't come to eat. They hadn't come to smile. They had come for him. Glasses shattered. Chairs screeched against the marble. Guests gasped and pulled back, their perfect evening dissolving into chaos. The billionaire's guard surged forward, but too late. The men moved like wolves, circling, cutting off every exit. And in the glittering hall where money usually ruled, power now meant nothing. The billionaire's heart slammed in his chest. For all his fortune, for all his empire, he was cornered, helpless, and the guests, the staff, even the bodyguards, they froze. Fear chained them to silence. Not a man in the room dared step forward. But from the far corner, a sound broke through. A laugh, soft, unexpected. It didn't belong. Heads turned. There he was, a boy of 15, tall for his age but still slight compared to the men towering around him. His skin was dark brown, glowing under the chandelier's light. His hair was cropped short. His jawline sharp for one so young, his eyes calm yet piercing, like steel forged in secret. He sat alone, unshaken, watching everything with unnerving clarity. No one knew him. To most, he was just a face, perhaps a waiter's son, perhaps a boy who didn't belong among billionaires. But tonight, the ignored would become unforgettable. The 4 attackers paused, just for a heartbeat. Something in his gaze, in the way he stood when he rose slowly from his seat, forced even killers to hesitate. The billionaire's eyes flicked to him in confusion. Why wasn't this boy running like the rest? Why wasn't he afraid? The boy's voice cut the silence, firm, measured. You don't know who you're dealing with. Laughter burst from the attackers, dark, dismissive. How could a child stand against them? But the laughter faltered when the boy stepped forward. His back straight, his stare unwavering. He carried himself with a weight no 15-year-old should have. And in that instant, as fear rippled through the room, everyone, rich and poor, powerful and powerless, realized a truth too great to ignore. This boy was not ordinary. He was not invisible. He was something far more dangerous. And the secret he carried was about to change everything. The 4 attackers tightened their circle, their boots heavy against the marble floor. Knives glinted in the low light, sharp steel catching the chandelier's glow. Guests shrank back in terror, pressing against the walls, too paralyzed to scream. The billionaire sat frozen, his gold watch gleaming like a target on his wrist, his empire meaningless beneath the shadow of violence. But in the center of it all, the boy moved, slow, steady, deliberate. He had no weapon in his hands, no bodyguards at his back, just courage burning in his chest. The assassins smirked. To them, this was nothing but a child playing hero. But the boy's eyes told another story. Dark brown, steady, unflinching. They were the eyes of someone who had seen storms before. Someone who had learned that fear only has power if you bow to it. "Step aside, kid," one of the men growled, his voice like gravel. He was the oldest, about 45, his face scarred, his thick arms marked with tattoos. His grip on the knife tightened. But the boy didn't move. His voice came again, calm, cutting. "You're already too late." Confusion flickered in the men's eyes. Too late for what? The billionaire's chest heaved. The guests looked at one another, their terror tangled with something new, curiosity. The boy took one more step. His shadow stretched across the marble, falling between the billionaire and the blades aimed at him. It wasn't size that gave him power. It was the way he carried himself, as if he had written the ending of this story long before they arrived. One attacker lunged. The youngest of the four, maybe 30 years old, his jaw sharp, his body lean and fast. His knife cut the air toward the boy. Gasps ripped through the room. The billionaire's fists clenched. But in a heartbeat, the boy moved. Not with panic, not with hesitation, but with precision. He sidestepped, his hand shooting out to the attacker's wrist. The knife clattered to the ground, sliding across the floor. The attacker staggered forward, hitting the marble hard. Silence crashed over the room. The guests blinked in disbelief. The boy, just a boy, had disarmed a man in seconds. The others roared, their arrogance cracking. Another attacker lunged. A man of 38, heavyset, with a thick beard and broad shoulders. He swung wildly, certain a child could not withstand his strength. But the boy ducked low, spinning, letting the man's momentum betray him. The giant stumbled, crashing into a table, glasses exploding against the floor. Now the room erupted. Gasps turned into shouts. Executives whispered frantically, guards fumbled forward, but still none dared to interfere. Their eyes were locked on the 15-year-old who moved with the sharpness of instinct, the elegance of strategy. The third man advanced more carefully. Mid-30s, tall, with a jagged scar over one brow. His blade gleamed and his steps were slow, measured. He circled, testing the boy's resolve. But the boy stood firm. His voice echoed again, low but unwavering. You picked the wrong place. You picked the wrong night. For the first time, uncertainty clouded the attacker's face. The boy wasn't bluffing. He wasn't flinching. The billionaire leaned forward, breath ragged, eyes wide. This boy, this unknown figure, was doing what his wealth, his guards, his power had failed to do. He was turning the tide. And then the fourth man stepped in, the leader. The oldest, the one with the scarred face and gravel voice. He grinned coldly, his knife dancing in his hand. You think you're clever, boy, but one move doesn't make you a hero. The boy met his stare, calm, cold, and then he whispered words that froze the leader in his tracks. I know why you're here. The billionaire's jaw dropped. The guests froze. The assassins stiffened. Suddenly, this was no longer about a fight, it was about secrets. The boy wasn't just defending, he was unraveling something darker. And the entire room realized with dawning terror, the boy knew more than he should. The restaurant stood frozen, time suspended in the heartbeat between life and death. Shattered glass glittered across the marble floor. Chairs lay overturned, food forgotten. The scent of expensive wine spilling into the air. And at the center of it all, the boy, 15 years old. Dark brown skin, sharp eyes that cut deeper than any blade, and a calmness that unsettled every man who faced him. The leader of the attackers sneered, his voice sharp. And what is it you think you know, boy? The boy took one step closer, his voice steady as steel. You're not here to kill him, not yet. You're here to send a message. Gasps rippled through the guests. The billionaire's hands clenched the edge of the table, his face pale. He knew the truth in those words. This wasn't random violence, it was strategy. A warning. The leader's smirk faltered just for a breath. The boy saw it and pressed forward. You were sent because they think he's untouchable. They think fear will silence him. But you made one mistake. The leader's jaw tightened. And what's that? The boy's eyes burned with a fire far older than his years. You didn't expect me? The room trembled with silence. For a moment, even the heartbeat. Monitors in the billionaire's private guards' earpieces seemed to pause. The attackers shifted uneasily. Their arrogance cracked, revealing the first hint of doubt. The third man, the one with the scar over his brow, spat to the side, trying to mask his unease. You're just a kid. But the boy shook his head. No, I'm the one who ends this. He moved before they could breathe. His hand snapped forward, knocking the scarred man's blade aside. A twist of the wrist, a sharp shove, and the man crashed to the ground, breathless. The heavyset one stumbled back to his feet, roaring with rage, but the boy's movements were faster, sharper, his foot connected with the man's knee, sending him collapsing with a howl. The youngest, desperate now, lunged again, but the boy caught his wrist, slamming him into the table. Plates shattered, silverware flew, and the attacker lay still. 3 men down. Only the leader remained. The billionaire's breath came ragged. He had watched bodyguards fail, watched men twice this boy's size crumble. And now, all that stood between him and death was a 15-year-old who refused to bow. The leader stepped forward slowly, knife flashing under the chandelier's glow. "You've embarrassed them," he said. "You've embarrassed me, but I'll make sure they remember your face before I end you." The boy didn't flinch. His voice was low, calm, terrifying in its certainty. "You won't touch him, because if you do, your bosses will know what I know." The leader froze. His grip tightened on the knife, but his eyes betrayed fear. He hissed through clenched teeth, "Who are you?" The boy stepped closer until the space between them was charged like lightning. "The one you should have feared before you walked in here." For a moment, neither moved. The crowd held its breath. And then, in a flash, the boy struck. His hand twisted, the knife clattered across the marble, and in one motion he pressed the leader to the ground. Silence. The billionaire rose to his feet, his suit torn, his face pale but alive. His voice cracked as he whispered, You saved my life." But the boy didn't smile. His dark eyes stayed locked on the fallen man, his voice colder than steel. "No, I saved your future. Remember that." The room erupted, guests shouting, guards rushing, the weight of everything crashing down. Yet all eyes, all whispers, all gasps turned toward the boy, a janitor's son, a teenager no one noticed until the night he stood taller than giants. The billionaire bowed his head, tears threatening his composure. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the most powerful man in the room. Because legends aren't written in wealth or age. They are written in courage. And that night, everyone in that restaurant knew the truth. A 15-year-old boy had done what no man could, and the world would never forget.